Hello, welcome to the webinar today, sponsored by the Signatry. I'm Kristen Hammett, and I am the Director of Ministry Services here at the Signatry. I'm joined by Dave Davies, who will be sharing with us today about his experience as a major gift officer, a planned giving advisor with Wycliffe Bible Translation Foundation. So we're so happy to have you with us, Dave. Before we jump into today's topic, and I see different folks are still tuning in, I want to remind you of a few things. First of all, continue to check on the Signatry Ministry Services page. You'll find that by going to who we serve and then ministries, and you'll find some new featured items there. You'll find tools and resources, a link to all of our past webinars, as well as a link to our Facebook community. Please, please, please join in on those different options. We'd love to engage with you and be able to support you. Again, as you've heard me say before, our vision here really is to equip you and to partner with you as in your development efforts as you continue to sow seeds of generosity and grow and expand the work that you are doing. So today's webinar is going to be a little bit different. There is a slideshow you see, so we will be sharing some slides with you throughout the day, but I wanted to let you know, so our format will be a little bit different. There is not a set presentation. What you'll see on these slides are actually questions that Dave and I have discussed already, and he's kind of outlined some answers, but we are not limited to those questions. So please feel free, as we begin this conversation, please send us your questions. We want to answer them. If we don't get to all of them, we will respond via email. This is your webinar. You are building your major donor programs, and we want to help you raise those major gifts. So please participate with us today, not only by viewing and taking notes. Certainly we encourage you to do that, but ask your questions as well. For those of you who have joined us in other webinars, you know that we'll post this later. So if you miss something, you can go back and get it later in a recorded version, but you can't ask your question live later. So please join with us, ask your questions. We certainly want to help you as much as we can today. If you have questions about logistics on how to do that, you will go down to the toolbar, go to the Q&A tab, and type in your question, and it will pop up magically on my screen. So before we go any further, I guess we just want to let Dave introduce himself so you kind of understand where he's coming from. Certainly a similar seat to what many of you find yourselves in, and then we'll jump into our questions. So Dave, why don't you share a little bit about yourself?
Thanks, Kristen. It's good to be here with you today, and I always enjoy coming to the Signatry Foundation. This is a very neighborhood where I spent the first 22 years of my life, just living and right across the street here and participating in the community here. So it's always fun to come back to this area of Overland Park, Kansas. And I'm married to Charlotte, and we have three adult kids, Emily, Ian, and Leah. Emily's married to Davis Ward, is our son-in-law. And I came to Christ really through the generosity of individual in this community. Ron Morris gave me a scholarship to go to a Fellowship of Christian Athletes camp in June of 1974. And it was a result of that generosity that I was able to go to camp and receive Christ as my Lord and Savior that summer. And it's a longer story, but I've been involved in the generosity side of ministry as a student and now professionally since 1982, and serve now with the Wycliffe Bible Translators Foundation in the major gifts and gift planning, gift and estate planning and asset funding. And as you might guess, we serve people from a biblical model of generosity and encourage people to really seek the Lord and be led by the Holy Spirit as they explore strategies and options in this area.
That's great. I love how you link your relationship with the Lord to someone else's generosity.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully that can be an encouragement to all of those who are doing the ministry work day in and day out, that whether it is sharing the gospel directly or some other arm of the ministry, the work that you're doing has great impact. And we can't even tell as we continue to sow seeds of generosity what the impact really will be long term. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So let's get into the topic at hand. We're more familiar with who you are. You have a variety of experiences building major donor programs. One of the questions I get asked often is, how do you define a major gift?
Mm-hmm.
What is a major gift? So how would you define that?
Well, I've had the privilege and opportunity to serve with a handful of ministries over the last 36 years, and each one has been at different stages of offering a major donor, a major gift program. Now serving with Wycliffe Bible Translators, we've really been intentional about that service to our donors during the last 15 to 20 years. For Wycliffe Bible Translators, we define major gift donor as somebody that has the capacity to give at least $5,000 a year in an outright current gift.
Okay, very good. So I get asked this question quite frequently from, we have different ministries tuned in, different nonprofits. I've encouraged them also to take a look at where the natural break is, maybe in their current giving, and kind of address your top, wherever that break is, that top section are your major givers. Oftentimes it seems, regardless of the size of ministry, there's a natural break right around that $5,000 mark. So I think that's really maybe an encouragement to those of you who are in smaller ministries, that you can maybe go down a little bit farther on that list. But that 5,000 seems to be a fair threshold. Some larger ministries maybe 10 or 20, but certainly where that break is, then addressing those people differently with some of what we're going to talk about today. So how do you find the major givers?
Well, for Wycliffe Bible Translators, we identify those through the people that are already giving to the ministry at some level. So a very natural progression for Wycliffe Bible Translators is somebody that begins supporting a member or missionary that's serving here in the United States or in one of 170 countries around the world. And typically through that relationship with a missionary individual, couple, or family, they begin through our communication and marketing strategy to become aware of Bible translations that they can fund, either with cash or with assets. And so that is one way. We also now, here in the last decade or so, do a lot of research with our donor files. So we're able to identify individuals and couples that have the capacity to be a major donor. And then it's through relationships and referrals as well. We have, through our board and through other volunteers and other donors, we're sometimes referred to people that have the capacity to be a major donor. In fact, one of those came through our relationship with Signatry. There's a couple actually here in the community that was introduced to us, and now here in the last few years they've become major donors.
Very good. Well, and I think just to build a little bit on what Dave said as he grabs a drink of water, is it's certainly an option and perhaps recommended that as you're meeting with a major donor, to ask for referrals, right? I grew up in corporate sales, and that was a function of what we did. And similarly, asking for a referral from a major donor that is existing in your organization. Oftentimes they run with, in their circle of influence are also folks that have similar passions as well as similar capacities.
That's right.
Very good.
Yeah, we find that runs in, like you say, circles of friends and family members. And so typically those individuals or couples will be willing to coordinate a introduction over a meal, or maybe invite a person or a couple like that to an event or a gathering of some kind.
Very good. All right, so help me understand who is a major donor. When I'm looking, you've told us to look through our donor records, maybe do some research, certainly ask for referrals. But then if I'm looking to kind of draw a picture of who that major donor is, in your experience, understanding this is not necessarily true for everyone, but how would you describe who a major donor is?
Well, quite often, as we're discussing, it's somebody that has a capacity to make a larger current or deferred gift. It's quite often somebody or a couple that has a long history with the ministry, and they're very passionate about the mission of the organization. So a combination of those things is very helpful. Quite often these individuals are entrepreneurial. They have leadership responsibilities within their area of work or business. And a lot of times they're business owners. So those are some of the indicators.
Yep, very good. Now you have age on here also. How does that play a role in this? Is this just kind of what you find over time, that they tend to be older, or?
It's what we find over time, and I'm sure a lot of our viewers have heard presentations or read research that most of the larger gifts are given by older people, and it's just a kind of a logical progression that men and women would, over a period of decades, would have assets and net worth to give. But it's not always true. It's, can be millennials, maybe somebody that's in their mid-40s that's had a lot of business and leadership success. And then in some cases, we have individuals and couples that have received significant inheritance. So I consistently run into people like that over the years, where they may be a very solid middle class kind of existence.
Yep.
And then through a relative or friend, they've received a significant inheritance. And so that's another area of ministry where they're wanting somebody that they trust to be able to really grapple with this new wealth that has come into their life, how to steward it, and then how to be generous with that inheritance.
Which also really makes the case then to build relationship as much as you can with your mid-level donors too, because they may become major donors as they age or get an inheritance or something happens. So we've had a question come in, so I want to make sure that we take a second before we move on and address this question. The question is, what advice would you give to someone moving into a new market geographically that has no recognition of the current ministry? Now, have you had that experience before? And whether you have or have not, what would you recommend to someone in that situation?
I have not had a lot of that type of experience personally, but my recommendation would be to really network with the Christian community in that area. I know here at Signatry Foundation, quite often when I'm not traveling and am here on a Friday, I come here to this office for a significant prayer gathering. And we have some ministries that participate in that prayer time that are they're networking, they're meeting people, developing
Sure.
relationships, and
Sure.
so that's helpful.
Yeah.
To be visible in the community in that way.
Absolutely.
Certainly, other gatherings and events that pull donors together and other ministry leaders and business leaders is helpful.
Yep, absolutely. So gaining visibility in the community is really a critical piece, whether that's done through churches, businesses, chambers of commerce. If there's some kind of nonprofit networking opportunity, I would leverage any of those options.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have additional questions, continue to feed those into us, because we definitely want to continue that conversation. So Jeremy, let me know if that helped answer your question or if you have a follow-up to that. So how do we engage major givers?
Well, for us, pretty fundamental, but with Wycliffe Bible Translators, prayer is a cornerstone of our ministry. So really every corner of the ministry, missionaries, members, board, other leadership, prayer is very fundamental to our effort. And it's the same thing with our advancement or development, the gift planning ministry. We really pray very specifically about the people that are contributing to the ministry. So prayer is a cornerstone. As I mentioned earlier, here a number of years ago, we started doing some research on our donor file. And so that's helped us to identify people that have the capacity to make a major gift. And then from there, we send a letter and a phone call to those individuals to offer a relationship and service. We found that people that have an interest in being a major donor are very receptive to a personal relationship with an individual. So for our mid-level professionals, they have about 500 people on their portfolio that they serve and relate to. Those that serve in major gifts have about 150 relationships that they manage. And so, on a very regular basis, they'll communicate with people in a variety of ways each month through the web, through phone, in person, once a quarter, twice a year, and try and help these individuals connect with the area of ministry that they really want to support and where they're most interested. And then we invite these individuals, in addition to visits and appointments and meetings, to participate in our gatherings and events. For us, for Wycliffe, domestic and international, we have scripture celebrations where we're celebrating every 6 months the completion of New Testaments and Bibles for languages that have never had any scripture before. So it's a great place to invite major donors and people that are considering being a major donor with the ministry.
That's great. I will just give my 2 cents here, coming from a little bit of a more regional development experience and background, is I think a lot of times where our smaller organizations fall short in this effort is we have really good ideas and we have really good plans to send that letter and then have a follow-up phone call. And it just doesn't happen because the pressing issues of the day take priority. So I think my encouragement to those of you who look at this list and say, okay, there's nothing new there, is make your plan and follow through. And let's see what that consistent, like you just said, kind of making a caseload, and this is my strategy in reaching each of them is, and then following through on it is really a critical piece. I also appreciate the first bullet point, and we actually here at the Signatry office just had a devotion yesterday on Psalm 127, so I will ask that you all jot that down, Psalm 127. But it really talks about how the Lord should lay the plans for your house. And much like that, he should be laying the plans for your major donor program and how you're going to engage them. So where our efforts sometimes seem to be in vain or we're toiling, if we will start it with prayer, certainly ask Him to lead out on those plans, and then we follow through, I think that we can all find some success in that effort. So.
And one thing that's helped me, Kristen, and our major gift officers and some of our leadership that have major donor relationships, I like to schedule on my calendar, on my phone, appointments throughout the day where I will actually schedule time to write notes and letters and phone calls. And I treat them like an in-person appointment that I can't break.
That's good.
And so I, just kind of make my to-do list that way. And it helps me to make sure that the phone call is a priority. Phone call and in-person appointments are the most fruitful experience.
Mm-hmm. I like that. I also like what you shared about celebrating success. When you have, completed a new translation or whatever ministry work that you are in, whenever you do have success, celebrating that, whether that is at an event or a phone call to share a positive story with a major giver and donor. We certainly, I think, sometimes just move on to the next thing, and we do need to take a moment to celebrate the good work that the efforts have yielded and celebrate that together. So that's good.
Yeah.
All right, I have another question before we move on. What are the best questions to ask to discover non-cash gift potential? I think we may get to this in a minute, so let's see. We'll keep this in the back of our minds as we continue through some non-cash options here in just a little bit. Okay, so what is the best way to communicate with those major donors?
Well, another area that's received a lot of attention and research is what's the most effective way to communicate. Always, throughout the decades, the best experience to have is in person. Even in a age where technology and just a variety of ways to communicate with people through social media and texting and other ways to communicate. If you're able to meet with an individual or a couple or family in person, the chances that something good is going to happen with regard to generous giving increases by 50%. So to meet with somebody at their office, over a meal, a coffee shop, it is always preferred. With regard to preference, we like to ask people what kind of multi-channel communication they prefer. Some people are big on email. I know that's true for me. Other people text, phone. It might be instant message. I've been surprised here in recent years how many people communicate with me through Facebook. Messaging and LinkedIn and Instagram, and the list goes on. So making a note within your record as you develop that relationship, you're going to find what is most effective for your major donors.
Very good. Okay, let's see what is next here. The next question: what are keys to a successful major donor program?
Well, we find as believers it's very basic and fundamental to really continue to grow and to be familiar with the biblical model of generosity. So as many of our viewers and participants know, there's about 2,300 different verses in the Bible that talk about finance. Many of those have to do with giving, especially to ministry. And so we like to really make that a priority, a biblical model of generosity, along with tax-wise planning strategies that are available today. And then to encourage donors that are considering funding, to be led by the Holy Spirit. We find as time goes on that as you implement and develop your major donor offering to people that are supporting the ministry, that it's really a ministry to your donors. You certainly have a need for ongoing funding to sustain and expand your mission, but at the very same time, there's an opportunity to encourage people to grow and develop in this facet of Christian discipleship and Christian living, and really to see generous giving as an act of worship. With some people, they'll find that they have the gift of giving, and people are, they often comment that as time goes on, as they grow in the Lord, that they have become cheerful in their giving, and they really get caught up in the joy of giving as well. So that is fundamental. Supportive leadership. Your leadership with your staff and your board, it's really helpful if they're supportive of your time, effort in serving in this, serving your donors in this area. And then research. If you're not able to do research internally, to be able to take advantage of some outside resources to do some analysis of your donor list is very helpful as you steward those relationships.
Sure.
And the people that are really in a position where they can be a major donor. And then for your staff to be very strategic in how you serve donors month in and month out throughout the calendar year.
Yes. So one of the things that we talked about just before we went live to you guys on this webinar is we just talked about the importance of supportive leadership. So that second bullet point, and how important it is that we don't look at the development work as just the business side, but also as ministry, just like the program side is ministry. So if someone is sitting in the chair and they feel very much marginalized as just producing the revenue so the program people can go do ministry, and they need a little bit more leadership buy-in, what would you recommend for that person who's kind of struggling with being viewed as ministry as well?
It's a very common struggle that I've seen throughout the course of my ministry, and even with Wycliffe Bible Translators, as we've been able to take some significant strides in this area and making it a priority. It's still a struggle because of the pressing needs and issues that are always there with any ministry. To be able to make major donor development and advancement a ministry to the donors a priority. And so again, it's really what I found is at the staff and board level, the leadership has to get behind it with budget and to really have a theology and a philosophy that this is a worthy investment for the ministry.
Yeah, very good. I have gotten a question that I'm going to offer up here. What is the best donor database to use and work with? You've worked for a variety of organizations. Have you had a variety of experiences with different software and donor database systems, or have you had internal programs?
We have. I've worked in my career, it's been mostly Blackbaud and now Salesforce. We made, Wycliffe Bible Translators made a switch to Salesforce here a couple of years ago, and that's been a very helpful tool for us. I travel almost every week and serving people in the eastern part or eastern half of the United States. And one of the things that I really like about Salesforce is the ease of accessing and keying in information from my smartphone and tablet.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
I tell you what, what I'm gonna do is post that question on our Facebook group, and so we'll get other ministry leaders to chime in. So please, if you haven't already become a member of our Facebook group, go to Signatry Ministry Services in Facebook, and I will post that question, and we'll get other feedback, Cindy, to see what other people are having success with, because I know I've heard a lot of good things about Salesforce. I've heard about other options out there too, so we certainly want to kind of do some searching and reapplying and learn from others in our community. Okay, one other thing it looks like on here we didn't get to. I think we're going to talk about it again, but I'd like to get your perspective, Dave, on that each proposal should be a blended gift ask. What does that mean?
Well, this has been a shift for Wycliffe Bible translators, and it is also consistent with my experience with a couple of other ministries over the decades as well, to get to a point when we are meeting with a major donor and offering a proposal on the project or the gift that we're wanting them to consider, that certainly we welcome checkbook giving, but included in that, we want to offer the ability for people to consider supporting that proposal with an asset. The most typical would be through appreciated stock of all kinds. It may be a part sale, part gift in real estate or a business interest, or it may be another appreciated asset. And then, of course, through IRA charitable rollovers for people that are over 70. And I had this discussion just yesterday afternoon. One of our longtime donors is just now finding out that the IRA gift represents a pocket that they can give from, and has some tax advantages there for them. So after this meeting, I'm going to follow up with another phone call and help them with that gift.
That's great. So when you are talking with someone, a major donor, about a gift, do you have a particular timeline you give them? Or is it more open-ended when you're having a gift discussion? Or does it kind of depend on where they are in the process?
It really depends on where they are in the process. And of course, every individual and couple is different. They may, during different seasons of the year, quite often in the last quarter of the year, they'll have a better idea of what their resources are going to be. They may be unsure about a bonus that typically is offered at year end, and so it just depends on the individual. It's quite often it's a timing kind of thing. So we have that in mind with these meetings and appointments and visits to talk about our need and the timeline that we have for funding to meet a project deadline. But we also want to be sensitive to them and try and align that with what works well for them.
Very good. What about these other pieces of a successful donor program? So we've covered the first half now, and you've kind of integrated some of these other points. Are there any other points here that you feel like you should call out that we haven't specifically talked about? Strategic, monthly, multi-channel marketing and communication, in-person appointments, responding to phone calls and emails from donors today. Yes. Talk about that one for me for a minute.
Well, you bet. It's I found as time has gone on that planning in January is a very natural time to come together with your colleagues and your team, your staff, to really look at the calendar year. And it's been kind of surprising to me what a difficult step that is for some ministries and organizations. But it's very helpful to frame out a month-by-month marketing and communication strategy for your advancement team and then specifically for your moves and service with your major donors. With regard to response, one of the things that we have in common with our foundation team, specifically on the gift and estate planning side, is we respond to interest the day we receive it. So when we receive an email or a phone call or a note, we're very busy and committed to respond that day.
Wow.
What we find and what we hear from our donors is, this comes up for me almost every week, maybe every other week. They will tell me that they've made similar inquiries with other favorite ministries, and it's very difficult for them to get a prompt phone call or email back, or even a willingness to go meet with them when it works for them.
Wow.
Some donors, within our strategy, we may be thinking that we're going to wait a quarter or 4 or 5 or 6 months for the next in-person appointment. But you'll get an email or a phone call that says, based on these factors, I really need to meet soon. I need to meet next week or the week after. So to be able to respond to that promptly and pivot and adjust is really blesses donors that we're able to do that.
That's really great. That's a challenge. I don't know about a challenge to you or not. It's a challenge to me because it's really a function of customer service, right? It's making them feel valued. They have a voice and you want to hear it and certainly address whether it is just a touch point call or something's changed in their dynamic. And they need to, if they have initiated an email or a phone call, then getting back with them in a very timely manner is, just like you said, a service to them. Yeah. So that's fantastic. And a challenge. I don't know about the rest of you, but that is a challenge. Okay, so what have you seen with major donors? What changes have you seen with major donors?
Well, with regard to staff that is really responsible for a major donor portfolio, I see some of the challenges with regard to a point that you mentioned earlier, that there are expanding expectations upon ministry staff, and so we constantly have to fight to make the major donor ministry within our advancement effort a priority. So that is that's a challenge, and there are always distractions, and so to make the in-person appointment really an emphasis in our service and effort is helpful. With regard to major donors, quite obviously the advancement and change in technology and the way that we communicate, and of course, when you think about it, most believers, most Christians have a real priority in their relationship with the Lord, with their marriage, their family. People that are major donors are successful in business. They quite often are very active in the Christian community and with several worthy ministries, and so people are busy, and I see that over the years is increasing. There are a lot of distractions.
Yes.
On both sides.
Absolutely. But it comes back to keeping the main thing, right? Make sure that we're not getting distracted with the littler tasks, the smaller yielding tasks perhaps, or the distractions, and focusing on what is relative and important, most important in those major donor relationships.
Yes.
That's very good. Yeah. So how big, and this is a question from a listener or a viewer, how big is your donor management team at Wycliffe, and what would you recommend for smaller ministries?
Well, when you think about it, gosh, there are 2 million charities, ministries, nonprofits, and all of those ministries and charities had a first day. And so for a larger ministry and organization like Wycliffe Bible Translators, we're now serving in 170 countries around the world. There are about 4,000 people serving in different capacities, domestic and international. But a number of years ago, it was just, a few people. And with regard to our advancement team, our foundation team, that's really something that's just come about in the last 20 years for us. And so now we have a more complete team with people serving in all areas, major gifts, research, foundation grants, mid-level donor representatives, direct mail and marketing, web-based communication. And so, we have people serving in all areas. With regard to major donor professionals, we have 8 or 9 that are spread out around the country. And then there are 2 of us that serve specifically on the gift planning, estate design, and asset funding. My colleague, Michael Acapente, lives in Colorado, and he serves everybody to the west of Kansas City.
Very good. So here's what I know I'd be thinking if I was in your seat working for a smaller organization, and that is, oh my goodness, all those different things, and there's just one of me, or there's 3 of us. Or I think what's probably critical is that somebody has in their job description this major gift officer piece, whether it warrants an entire position or it's just a portion of someone's job description, that somebody feels that responsibility to own it, to develop it, to interact. Sometimes that might mean your president or CEO, executive director, helping to manage some of that piece, but somebody who is really focused on developing major donor relationships. Would you agree?
Yes, I would. And with my professional and volunteer experience with quite a variety of different ministries, just starting is really important. So, Kristen, as you're saying, it could be for that 1 or 2 person department that they take on 10 or 20 people that would fit in that major donor category. It may be for the president of the ministry, the CEO, maybe the chief operating officer. Same thing. Maybe they take on just 10 or 20 as a starting point. But it's to launch, to start is important.
Absolutely. I would also say as an encouragement, get in there and start developing those relationships. I just spoke with a ministry last week who said, I know I'm meeting with someone who has great capacity, but he doesn't even know where to start. And so she is really beginning a relationship and discipleship with him and starting to talk about generosity. And this is going to be more of a long-range relationship, which oftentimes major donor relationships are. So don't get discouraged if a major gift doesn't happen. A lot of relationship building sometimes has to happen. So remember what Dave said earlier is a lot of times these people are already on your donor lists. They're not giving necessarily at that major donor level yet, but they have capacity to do so. So the gap there is relationship building, sharing with them what the opportunities are. If they've never been asked, they may be a hidden treasure within your donor roles that they've never been envisioned to a bigger ask or a bigger project. And so they're going to give you $20 a month or $500 unless they're asked for more. So sometimes that just has to happen through relationship building.
Well, and for the donors within your list that you've identified as major donors, For some, it's very obvious, and for others, it's come about by way of research. You don't have to know everything. It's I know for me, I started out in this area in 1982, and the Lord has provided training and experiences and continuing education, and then individuals that the Holy Spirit has just dropped into my life to help me mature and develop and grow in this area. And of course, obviously have a friend in the Signatry Foundation, and so help is available. I find that major donors appreciate a very authentic,
yes,
sincere relationship development. So if you're unsure, if you don't know the answer, it's okay to be transparent with the donor.
Absolutely.
And then go find the answer and use that as a touch point with your next meeting with them.
Very good. Okay, so let's get on with, I think we're going to circle back. Jeremy, I think maybe you had a question earlier about some of the planned giving options, non-cash giving. So what opportunities exist with major donors relative to planned giving?
Well, it's, just like the biblical model of generosity, we find from Genesis to Revelation that believers in the Bible had more assets to give than cash. The percentages are really about the same for adult Americans. So depending on the report that you're reading, adult Americans hold between 1% to 9% in cash with regard to their net worth. And so quite obviously, and we hear this from Signatry quite often, people have most of their net worth is in assets. And so it's not to minimize the cash giving, but to keep the conversation going with asset considerations in addition to cash. So an easy place to start, as we mentioned earlier, appreciated stock, donations, giving through IRAs, and then for your donors that may be considering a part sale, part gift on a piece of real estate, or they're going to sell an interest that they have in a business, that's a great place to offer service and to help them make a major gift, maybe the largest gift that they've ever made. With regard to deferred kinds of options through charitable trust, charitable annuities where it's a part gift, part income arrangement, there's an opportunity there. And then with gifts through a will, estate plan, or beneficiary designations on financial accounts, brokerage accounts, retirement accounts, and even real estate. Those are very easy places for individuals to include your ministry for a percentage of those assets.
Very good. And we talked about this when we were visiting before the webinar, but this is not a transactional type of gift. This is going to be a gift that you may foster for a long time. You may begin this conversation sometime in the next year with someone and just kind of planting the seed that this opportunity exists. And this type of non-cash gift, if it stocks, it may happen before the end of the year. If it's part of a business or real estate, it could be years before the gift actually happens, but the conversation is beginning much earlier.
Yes.
Agreed?
And in fact, I have one couple and then a relationship with a brother and sister. So the brother and sister own a company, a second generation company. And then the other couple that I know, also a second generation company. The couple I've been talking with for 3 years about a part sale, part gift on their business.
Yeah.
And then the brother and sister that own a business has been a 5-year conversation, and kind of interesting. We think in 2019 will be the year that both of those will move forward. But that's just one example of, in some cases, people want to move very quickly. In other cases, it's a period of time.
Yeah.
I had a couple here 2 years ago that they were reading the communication and the marketing on part sale, part gift on a business. They didn't contact me until December, and they wanted to complete the gift by the 31st. And so sometimes it happens within a period of days, other times years.
We're very well aware of the short timing sometimes those gifts come in on. And I'm going to let you get a drink, Dave, and this really struck me when we talked about this before. Sometimes there's fear that kind of prevents us from mentioning these non-cash options because we're afraid that the existing cash gift we're getting may go away. And your experience is that is not at all the case.
That's right, Kristen, and it's I consistently find that people consider gifts beyond their checkbook. Typically, they increase their current outright funding and their checkbook giving. There's also been a lot of research that's been done on this over the decades, and we find that rarely is the cash outright gifts diminished when asset giving factors into their generosity.
And I would say, as an encouragement to those of you who maybe are starting to just initially think about this, offering this, beginning to share this opportunity of non-cash giving to grow generosity, is it can really add value to your relationship because you are offering them an opportunity they maybe didn't even know existed. And is that true in your experience as well?
That's true, and it's it's a pretty fun moment to be able to connect the major donor more deeply with the ministry and to help them to make a large gift that's really going to make a significant impact on the life-changing mission that you're offering through your ministry.
So ministries, I'm going to just kind of skate through this slide because I know I want to get to the next one as well. Ministries, engaging donors with asset gifts. You suggest unified leadership and staff commitment. We've talked about that already. Multi-channel marketing. I think one thing that we talked about previous to the webinar is including this information on non-cash giving in different areas of communication, whether that's an email or your newsletter that goes out, a Facebook post, just continuing to get that message out there, kind of planting those seeds along the way.
Yeah, it's just so fascinating how important it is to identify all the different forms of communication, including verbal, and make sure there's a very intentional, thoughtful plan to invite people to consider these kinds of gifts. We had a kind of a funny experience happen to us 2 years ago. During July, we had to postpone some of our communication. And it was interesting that the interest level from our donors really dried up during that month. And sure enough, web-based, direct mail, other forms of communication produces, it helps to produce interest week in and week out. And really for us, almost day in, day out. So
very good. Okay, so how do you move a mid-level donor to a major donor? We'll quickly get through this one. And
well, through introducing gift planning and asset funding. You know, quite often, individual or a couple that is a mid-level donor can make their largest gift through a deferred gift plan, a beneficiary designation, or part gift, part sale from real estate or a business interest that they have. So that's one way. It's we find that the ministry and the service that our mid-level professionals deliver will connect those donors more deeply with the ministry, and they express an interest in being able to give at a higher level. Mm-hmm. And so we, our mid-level professional, part of our team, will often hand those people off to our major donor officers and professionals.
Very good. All right. I don't know if I skipped one there. Did I get that one? Let's see. Okay. So next steps, we're going to kind of skate through this. Guys, I'm going to assure you that we probably are not going to get through all of these slides in today's presentation. Hopefully that this has still been very beneficial to you. What we will do is include the entire recording as well as all of these slides in an email to you. If you have ongoing questions as you read through the email or read through the slideshow, feel free to shoot me a message and I can collaborate certainly with Dave, and we will get you some answers to those things that we don't get covered. But a key piece to consider in planning a major donor program, what would you recommend, Dave?
Well, again, it's the leadership support, having a thoughtful strategy for the year. And for us, it's been being resourceful too with our relationship with the Signatry Foundation, especially in the area of complex considerations as it relates to real estate, that may be a part sale, part gift, and in some cases people will it'll be helpful if they can enjoy a income from that over a period of years as well through a charitable trust. So promoting real estate and business interest considerations is a significant opportunity today with our major donor efforts.
And I know that Dave said in one of those bullet points, it says incorporate the Signatry marketing. I am going to, as part of our follow-up, we will certainly give you some of those one-pagers that talk about the things that you've talked about: stock gifts, real estate, partial business sales or business interest sales, as well as business sales. So while this is not a commercial for the Signatry, we do want to equip you with that information because there are some key pieces in that you can certainly share with your donors. And then this last piece I think is pretty self-explanatory, so I want to be able to wrap up here on time and let you guys get back to your work. Just know that we are here to encourage you, we are here to equip you and partner with you. Dave can speak to the fact that that has happened with his long-standing relationship with the Signatry far before I was around here. So thank you, Dave, for partnering with us in this capacity today. A little bit different than what normal relationship is like, but we certainly value your perspective and your experience, and hopefully those of you who have tuned in today have found some value in Dave's experience. What I would say to you is those of you who don't have a large staff is what Dave has said several times throughout today's presentation, and that is start today. Start somewhere. Begin that effort. Just be encouraged that with prayer and some planning and meetings that you can gain some traction in this major giving, major donor area. So please be encouraged by that. So thank you, Dave, for that encouragement and the focus on really seeking the Lord. And this is ministry. You're doing ministry when you interact with your donors. God has outlined in Scripture over and over and over lots of examples of stewardship and the value he places on that in relative to our financial resources. So as we close up here today, I ask that you circle on your calendars December 13th, 1 o'clock Central Time. We're going to be talking with Ray Gary, who is the CEO of I Donate, and he's going to be talking to us about electronic giving. Electronic gifts could be a key piece of your December giving, your year-end giving. As we focus on those last few days of the year, you certainly want to be able to leverage that online giving opportunity.
We use that resource as well.
Very good.
Very helpful.
Look at that. See? All kinds of resources we want to provide you. Again, equipping you to build out your development program. So I hope you've learned something from today. I know you'll learn something as you continue to engage in these webinars, engage with us on Facebook as well as the resources on our webpage. We're so happy to have you join us, and we are thrilled to partner with you. As we turn the calendar at the end of this week into next week, it's Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is upon us. So I want to be the first to tell you thank you from the Signatry. We are thankful for you. We're thankful for the work that you do, and we're thankful for the opportunity to work together to continue to grow and expand that work. So thank you for serving in your capacity. Don't forget, you are doing ministry, and we are here for you. Thank you so much, and God bless.